The last great cities of Earth stood defiant against time, but beneath their towering spires, the truth was undeniable: humanity was running out of time. Oceans had risen, resources had dwindled, and conflicts over what remained threatened to plunge civilization into ruin. The dream of reaching the stars had always been a luxury, a fantasy for the hopeful. But now, it was a necessity. Dr. Elias Carter leaned against the railing of the orbital station Horizon Prime, watching Earth spin below. The planet, once vibrant, now bore the scars of centuries of overuse. He exhaled, steeling himself. "The Exodus Initiative is our last shot," a voice behind him said. It was General Catherine Vasquez, head of UEG's military division. "And you're the only one crazy enough to pull it off." Carter chuckled dryly. "Crazy? Maybe. But this drive, this could be the key." The prototype FTL drive, a theory for decades, had only recently become feasible. But funding it, constructing it, and most of all, testing it in a universe where alien civilizations had already established dominance, that was another matter entirely. As if on cue, an alarm blared. A distress signal echoed through the station. Carter and Vasquez rushed to the control center, where Admiral Foster stood grim-faced. "We intercepted a transmission," Foster said. "Deep space. Not ours." The message played. A guttural alien language, then translated words appeared. "Sol system detected. Pre-warp species. Designation, humanity. Status, unclaimed. Zorvax Dominion fleet en route." A cold chill swept through the room. They weren't alone in the universe. And someone was already coming. The control center of Horizon Prime was silent, save for the hum of machinery and the occasional static-laden transmission from deep space relays. The intercepted message loomed over them like a storm cloud. Humanity had spent centuries wondering if it was alone in the cosmos. Now, it had its answer. And the answer was coming for them. General Vasquez broke the silence. "How long until they arrive?" Admiral Foster's face was grim. "We don't know. Days, months, could be years. But one thing is certain, the Zorvax Dominion doesn't recognize our right to exist." Dr. Carter exhaled sharply. "Then we don't have time to wait." His eyes flicked to the holographic schematics of the Dauntless, the first, and only, prototype ship equipped with the experimental FTL drive. It wasn't ready. It wasn't safe. But it was the only chance humanity had to reach beyond the Sol system before alien warships descended upon them. Vasquez crossed her arms. "You're suggesting we launch now?" Carter nodded. "If we wait, we could lose our only opportunity to gather intelligence. We need to know what's out there. We need to know what we're up against." Admiral Foster exchanged a look with Vasquez before nodding. "Then we prepare for launch." ####12 hours later, aboard the Dauntless. The launch bay of Horizon Prime bustled with last-minute preparations. Engineers triple-checked hull integrity, while pilots ran diagnostics on navigation systems. The Dauntless was a sleek, compact vessel, built for speed and endurance. But it had never been tested in actual spaceflight, let alone with its FTL capabilities engaged. Carter stood by the boarding ramp, a duffel slung over his shoulder. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Arya Novak, approached, her expression unreadable. "You're really doing this," she said. Carter smirked. "Guess I am." She sighed. "Then I'm coming with you." Carter raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" Novak scoffed. "Please. You'd get lost 5 minutes after jumping." A voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel clear the launch bay. Dauntless departing in T-2 minutes." Carter and Novak exchanged a final look before stepping inside. The cockpit was sleek, a fusion of cutting-edge technology and barely tested innovations. Screens flickered to life as they strapped in, and the engines hummed beneath them. "Systems online," Novak reported. "Coordinates set." Carter took a breath. His fingers hovered over the activation sequence for the FTL drive. If it worked, they'd make history. If it failed, well, space was a lonely place to die. Here goes nothing, he muttered. He pressed the final command. The stars outside the viewport twisted, bending into impossible shapes. A sudden lurch in his stomach, reality itself seemed to fold around them. Then, the Dauntless vanished from Sol. #### unknown star system, 23 light-years from Earth. When the ship stabilized, Carter's vision swam. He gripped the console as the world around him righted itself. The FTL drive had worked. They had crossed an unimaginable distance in the blink of an eye. "We made it," Novak whispered, awestruck. Carter exhaled. "Yeah. But where is?" The proximity alarm shrieked. Novak snapped to attention. Multiple bogies on approach. Unknown origin. Carter's stomach twisted. Through the viewport, dark, angular ships loomed from the void. The Zorvax had found them. And they were not here to talk. The warning alarms blared relentlessly in the cockpit of Dauntless. Carter's fingers danced over the controls as his mind raced. He had known they would face threats, but the Zorvax, this soon? This was worse than he had imagined. Multiple contacts closing fast. Novak's voice was tight with tension. "They're on an intercept course." Carter's eyes were glued to the display, where dark, massive ships, sharp-edged and foreboding, began to fill the screen. The Zorvax fleet was vast, their ships sleek and menacing, a reflection of the Empire's ruthless nature. *Dauntless*, this is Admiral Vorkin of the Zorvax Dominion. You are trespassing in Imperial territory. You will surrender immediately or face extermination. The voice was calm, too calm, considering the circumstances. It was the voice of a predator toying with its prey. Carter's grip tightened on the console. "We're not surrendering to anyone," he muttered under his breath, before turning to Novak. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." "What about the FTL?" Novak asked, eyes wide. "If we jump now, we'll be sitting ducks in unknown space. They'll follow us." Carter hesitated. It wasn't a decision he wanted to make, but they had no choice. The Zorvax couldn't be allowed to follow them back to Earth. If they did, the solar system would be lost. He could only hope their ship was fast enough to shake them. "Set a course back toward Earth," he ordered, voice steady. "We'll jump when we have enough distance." Novak hesitated, but then nodded and began inputting the coordinates. Just as they were about to initiate the jump, the Zorvax fleet opened fire. Laser beams seared past the Dauntless, lighting up the darkness of space in a deadly show of force. The hull shuddered, and warning lights flashed across the cockpit. "Shields holding," Novak reported, though her voice betrayed her concern. "But we can't keep taking hits like this." Carter gritted his teeth. There was no time to waste. "Activate FTL now." The ship lurched again, but this time, there was no twisting, no bending of space. The FTL drive powered up, and in a flash of blinding light, they shot forward, narrowly escaping the clutches of the Zorvax fleet. As the stars outside began to settle into the familiar, stable pattern of interstellar space, Carter allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had made it, for now. But Novak wasn't as quick to relax. She turned to him, her face pale. "Where are we? What if they tracked us?" Carter's hands gripped the controls tighter, now feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. "We're outside the Sol system. And we're not going back until we know exactly what we're dealing with." His mind raced as he considered the implications. Earth's fate rested on their ability to understand the galaxy beyond their own borders. If the Zorvax were a sign of what awaited them in the stars, if Earth's entire existence could be wiped away with a single word, then humanity's future was not just uncertain. It was at risk. "There's no turning back now," Carter said softly, more to himself than to Novak. "We're not just trying to survive anymore. We're going to change the rules. Novak looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. And how do we do that, exactly? Carter met her gaze. We fight. We learn. And we find allies who aren't afraid to stand up to the Zorvax and anyone else who thinks they can control us. As the Dauntless cruised deeper into the unknown, the horizon ahead was filled with possibilities, some hopeful, others dangerous. But humanity had always been resilient. If they had to fight for their place in the stars, so be it. They would fight, with every ounce of strength they had. And in the end, they would not be the prey. They would be the predators. ### back on Earth, United Earth Government Headquarters. News of the Dauntless' journey beyond the Sol system had already begun to spread, though the full extent of what had happened was still under wraps. Behind closed doors, a meeting of the United Earth Government was taking place in a secure conference room. General Vasquez stood before a large table, surrounded by representatives from the military, science, and political spheres. We've lost contact with the Dauntless, Vasquez said, her tone steady but filled with underlying concern. But the good news is, they've discovered something we've never known before. A map of the galaxy was projected onto the screen, pinpointing areas beyond Earth's influence, regions where humanity had never ventured. There are more alien empires out there, more species, and they're not all hostile. But we've learned something crucial from the Zorvax's response. Vasquez paused, letting the words sink in. We have been underestimated. For too long, humanity has been seen as weak, insignificant. But the Zorvax made a mistake when they attacked the Dauntless. They underestimated us. The room fell silent as Vasquez's words echoed in the minds of the gathered officials. The galaxy was vast. But it was time for humanity to take its place in it. Weeks passed without contact from Dauntless, and with each passing day, the unease among the United Earth Government, UEG, grew. Despite the silence, one thing was clear: the Zorvax were coming. Their fleet was relentless, advancing through space with chilling precision. Earth had little time to prepare. Back on Earth, Carter and Novak's fates remained a mystery. Yet, the UEG had no choice but to act as if their mission had failed. The military began fortifying defenses, constructing weapons, and deploying fleets. Humanity would not be caught unprepared again. But then, an unexpected message arrived. It was a coded transmission from Dauntless, just hours after their escape from the Zorvax. The message was simple, yet filled with gravity. The Zorvax are only one faction in a larger galactic order. But the true enemy is worse. We've made contact with other species. Prepare for war. And learn fast, because the fight is coming to Earth. The transmission ended abruptly. There were no further details, no indication of how they had escaped. But the message was clear: humanity was now part of something far bigger. And the galaxy, it seemed, was a place where survival was a constant struggle for power. ### The Edge of Sol System, Earth Fleet Command. General Vasquez stood before a holographic display of Earth's defense strategy, her eyes scanning the models of Earth's new fleet. It was humanity's first true military force capable of defending against the vastness of space. She had no illusions about what was to come. The Zorvax would not be the only threat. The galaxy had far too many dangers lurking within its dark expanse. General Vasquez, we have a situation, Lieutenant Blackwell said as he entered the command room, his face taut with urgency. What is it? Vasquez asked without turning. The Zorvax fleet has just entered the outer rim of the Sol system. They've deployed assault vessels. Vasquez froze. Earth had prepared, yes, but it was never prepared for a direct attack of this magnitude. The Zorvax had made no secret of their intention to crush humanity underfoot. Have the fleet deployed our first line of defense? She asked. Blackwell nodded grimly. Yes, but they're vastly outnumbered. Our forces are outclassed. The Zorvax ships are far more advanced in terms of firepower and speed. We can't afford to lose, Vasquez said, her voice cold. Initiate the emergency protocol. Prepare for a defensive strike, and rally any resistance groups we've identified. We may be outmatched, but we have one thing they don't: ingenuity. Understood, General. Vasquez watched as the first wave of humanity's ships, dozens of fighter craft, sleek destroyers, and the newly constructed Titan warships, shot into space. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Humanity had learned to survive on Earth through sheer willpower. The stars would not be different. ### the Zorvax assault, space above Earth. The battle began in the vacuum of space, with the Titan warships facing off against the overwhelming might of the Zorvax fleet. The Zorvax ships were huge, easily 10 times the size of humanity's largest vessels, equipped with weapons that could obliterate anything in their path. Their formations were perfect, their strikes brutal. But humanity, even in its relative infancy as a spacefaring species, fought like a wounded animal, driven, relentless, and desperate. Carter had taught them that much. And in the heat of the battle, it was becoming increasingly clear: humanity's edge was not in brute strength, but in creativity and adaptability. As Zorvax ships loomed over Earth, ready to release their deadly payload, humanity's fleet executed a maneuver so audacious it seemed suicidal. They engaged cloaking devices, based on technology stolen from the Dauntless mission, and launched an attack from a seemingly impossible angle. The Zorvax were blindsided. Dauntless' data had paid off. The cloak and dagger tactics, the guerrilla-style ambushes, the rapid strikes, all of it was proving effective. Humanity's fleets, though outgunned and outnumbered, were beginning to hold their own. Zorvax forces found themselves caught in a nightmare they hadn't expected, a war they couldn't win with brute force alone. Carter, still deep in uncharted space with Novak, watched the battle unfold from afar. He knew what humanity was doing. He had known the moment they arrived back on Earth that this wouldn't be a simple war. But they had a chance now. And, like the survivors of old, they would keep fighting until there was nothing left to lose. "This is only the beginning," Carter whispered, eyes locked on the data streams. "But we're not going to lose." ### the Galactic power shift. The Zorvax fleet was not defeated, not yet, but they were no longer unstoppable. Humanity's resistance had made them pause, had made them rethink. The galaxy was vast, filled with empires much older and more powerful than Earth, but the defiance shown by humanity was something none of the other species had ever expected. They hadn't anticipated a species that would fight to the last, not because they had nothing to lose, but because they had everything to gain. The entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see if the Zorvax would finish what they started, or if Earth's defiance would spark a larger revolution across the stars. For the first time, the Zorvax were forced to reconsider their place in the galaxy, and humanity's place was just beginning. The war had only just begun. The battle above Earth had not been won, but it had not been lost either. The Zorvax, though still superior in firepower and numbers, had been forced to rethink their strategy. For the first time, humanity had drawn blood, and that blood had tasted bitter in the mouths of their enemies. But Earth was still far from safe. The Zorvax were not known for their mercy, and their pride would demand retribution. Back in the depths of space, Carter and Novak's ship Dauntless drifted through the blackness, its system still humming with barely contained energy. The coordinates that had led them here, far beyond the edges of known space, had been calculated with one goal in mind: finding allies. "Do you think they'll help us?" Novak asked, her voice laced with skepticism as she peered out the viewport. The stars beyond them were unfamiliar, their constellations foreign to her. "We have to believe they will," Carter replied, hands tight on the console. His voice was more tired than he'd ever let on. It had been weeks since their last contact with Earth, and with each passing moment, the Zorvax grew closer. But beyond this unknown stretch of space, Carter was certain there were others who could help. If they could make it to them, they might have a chance. Ahead, a massive shadow loomed against the backdrop of a gas giant. The ship was unlike anything they had seen before, sleek, silver, with curving lines that spoke of an advanced civilization, far beyond Earth's reach. The species aboard this vessel was known as the Keris, an ancient race that had long remained neutral in galactic affairs. Until now. "We're being hailed," Novak said, her voice tinged with both caution and awe. "Put it through," Carter ordered, straightening in his seat. The image that appeared on the screen was a tall figure, almost ethereal in its appearance. The Keris had the look of beings who had transcended the physical world, their bodies shimmering in a way that defied the natural order. Their eyes, if they could be called eyes, gleamed with intelligence and a haunting understanding of the universe. "I am Ambassador Tellan," the figure spoke, the voice smooth and almost musical. "I've been watching your species, Earthlings. And I see that you have defied the Zorvax." Carter couldn't suppress a grin. "You've been watching us?" Tellan's gaze remained steady, unreadable. "We have been aware of your existence for millennia, but we never intervened. Your species is volatile, unpredictable. Yet now, you have caught the attention of forces far greater than the Zorvax. And that's why we need your help," Novak added quickly. "The Zorvax are coming for us. They're going to wipe us out, just like they did to the others before us." Tellan's expression softened ever so slightly. "The Zorvax are not the only threat in the galaxy. But they are certainly the most immediate. And though we have remained neutral in all conflicts, this time is different." Carter leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "So, you'll help us?" Tellan's eyes glimmered, the weight of untold centuries in his gaze. "We will help you. But only if you understand what that entails. The Zorvax are but one player in a galactic game of unimaginable stakes. You must be prepared for what comes next." Before Carter could respond, Tellan's image flickered, and suddenly, the ship was no longer alone. Across the vastness of space, more ships appeared, each of them belonging to different races, each as strange and varied as the stars themselves. There were the Oroliths, towering behemoths of crystal and organic matter, their ship a living entity. The Saitari, a race of sentient energy beings, their forms shifting like liquid light. The Silphar, whose fleet was invisible, save for the shimmer of their shields. "We are not the only ones who've been watching," Tellan continued, his voice almost a whisper. "There are others, too, those who have stood aside as the galaxy tore itself apart. But now, the Zorvax threaten not just you, but all of us. We will stand together, for the first time in millennia, to face this common enemy." Carter's heart swelled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "And what do you need from us?" "Survival," Tellan said simply. "You are not alone in this fight. But you must understand one thing, this war is not just about saving your home. It is about shaping the future of the galaxy. And the path forward will not be easy." "Then we're ready," Carter said, voice steady, though his mind raced. "We'll fight. We'll fight for Earth. And for all of you." Tellan's gaze softened, as if impressed. "Good. Because the war has only just begun." Back on Earth, the UEG War Council. Back at Earth's command, Vasquez watched the situation unfold with a mixture of grim determination and disbelief. News of Dauntless' success in reaching the Keris had given humanity a fleeting moment of hope, but only a moment. The Zorvax were regrouping, and the true scale of their might was becoming clear. "We've received confirmation," Lieutenant Blackwell said, looking up from his console. "The Keris are preparing to send reinforcements. But it will take time we don't have. And we're still outnumbered," Vasquez said with a frown. "The Zorvax are relentless. We need to end this before it escalates further." "General," Blackwell interjected, "we've been in contact with Dauntless. Carter and Novak have reported that the Keris will not be enough on their own. We need to accelerate our plans to arm ourselves." Vasquez clenched her fists. "I know. We'll need every weapon, every ship we can muster. And we need to prepare our people. We're in for a fight unlike anything we've ever seen." Across the galaxy, both allies and enemies were mobilizing. The stage was set for a war of unimaginable scale, one that would determine not just the future of Earth, but the future of the galaxy itself. But in the midst of this, a single truth remained undeniable: humanity had come a long way. And they were not going down without a fight. The galaxy had been thrust into chaos. From the moment humanity had defied the Zorvax, the stakes had risen. Earth was no longer a quiet, insignificant planet in the far-flung corner of the Milky Way. The Zorvax had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now, the entire galaxy was watching, waiting to see if Earth could stand its ground. Back at the United Earth Government's headquarters, preparations were in full swing. The Titan-class warships, designed in haste yet built with unprecedented ingenuity, were now ready for their first true trial by fire. Humanity's allies, races that had watched in silence for millennia, were mobilizing, but the time for diplomacy was over. Now, it was time to fight. General Vasquez stood in the war room, staring at the massive holographic map of the galaxy. The Zorvax fleet was closing in on the inner rim of Earth's space. The odds were grim, but humanity had never been known to surrender. "How much time do we have?" Vasquez asked, her voice commanding the room's attention. "We're looking at less than 12 hours, Blackwell replied, his voice grim. "The Zorvax are nearly at the edge of our defenses, and their fleet is more massive than we ever anticipated. Our current forces won't hold them for long." "And the reinforcements?" "Incoming, but it'll take time. The Karis, the Oroliths, and the Saitari are on their way, but they won't be here in time to make a difference in this initial wave." Vasquez's expression hardened. "Then we fight with what we have. We hold the line until they arrive. Dauntless will be back soon, and we'll have more allies to call on. Humanity's future is on the line. We can't afford to lose now." Across the galaxy, similar discussions were taking place. Every fleet, every species that had pledged its support to Earth's survival was preparing for the coming storm. Yet despite the weight of the situation, humanity's resolve remained unshaken. If there was one thing that defined them, it was their unwillingness to give up, even when all seemed lost. Hashtag in the depths of space, Dauntless and the Allied fleet ****. Carter sat at the helm of Dauntless, his fingers hovering over the controls. The ship was fully repaired now, its systems humming with life as it made its way back toward Earth. Novak was beside him, tracking their flight path toward the newly formed Earth Defense Fleet. They had made contact with every Allied race willing to listen, but now, they needed a coordinated strike. "Any updates from Earth?" Novak asked, breaking the silence. Carter shook his head. "Not yet. But if Earth holds its ground until we get there, we might have a shot at stopping the Zorvax." They were closer now, closing the gap between Earth and their allies. But as they neared the edge of the Sol system, Carter's thoughts turned to the battlefield ahead. The Zorvax were waiting. And they would not wait forever. "We need to get there in time," Novak said, her voice tight. "We can't let them fall." Carter nodded. "We won't." As the Allied fleet came into view, Carter's heart lifted for a brief moment. The combined force of the Karis, Saitari, Oroliths, and Silphur was overwhelming in both size and diversity. Yet, despite the size of the incoming fleet, Carter knew their true strength lay not in numbers, but in their unity. The last thing the Zorvax expected was a united front from so many species, all of whom had once been bystanders to the galaxy's power struggles. But the Zorvax were different. Their cruelty, their dominance, had driven all of these once neutral races into a collective defense of Earth. "This is it," Novak murmured. "The final fight." Carter glanced at the tactical display. The Zorvax fleet was now just beyond the reach of Earth's outer defenses. Their ships glowed with a cold, merciless light, indifferent to the lives they would extinguish. The Zorvax did not see the rising tide of resistance. They did not anticipate the coalition that was forming in the dark void of space. It was time for the galaxy to shift in humanity's favor. "We go in at full speed," Carter said, voice firm. "We don't let them get the first strike. Prepare for combat." Hashtag the opening salvo, Earth Defense Fleet vs. Zorvax Empire. The battle began with a violent, sudden eruption of laser fire and explosive debris as the Earth Defense Fleet engaged the Zorvax head-on. Humanity's ships, reinforced with alien technology and weaponry, struck first. The Zorvax, unprepared for the swiftness and ferocity of the attack, struggled to regroup. It was a chaotic melee of twisted metal and burning plasma as the two fleets collided. Earth's ships, smaller and more agile, darted in and out of Zorvax formations, launching precision strikes at weak points. The Zorvax, on the other hand, relied on sheer force and overwhelming firepower, launching massive barrages of energy beams toward the defending fleet. The first casualty came swiftly. One of Earth's Titan warships, the Victory, took a direct hit from a Zorvax dreadnought. The ship split in two, but not without taking a few of the Zorvax ships with it. The loss sent shockwaves through Earth's fleet, but it only fueled the determination of the soldiers and pilots. They would not let Earth fall. Return fire. All units engage at will. General Vasquez's voice came through the comms, cutting through the chaos. But even as humanity's forces fought valiantly, the Zorvax continued to press their advantage. The first wave of the Karis fleet arrived, but they were still too far from the front line. It was up to Earth's forces to hold them off long enough. As the battle raged, Carter's voice came over the comms, his calmness cutting through the noise. "We've arrived. Let's give them hell." And with that, Dauntless led the charge, plunging straight into the heart of the Zorvax fleet. Their ships, now bolstered by the combined power of Earth's allies, began to overwhelm the Zorvax. But the war was far from over. The Zorvax were ruthless, and they would not back down without one last fight. Yet, as the first salvo was fired and the tides began to turn, humanity had already proven something the galaxy would never forget: they were not here to be conquered. They were here to conquer. The fight for the stars had just begun. The battle for the stars had reached its crescendo. The tide had turned, but the war was far from won. As the combined forces of humanity and their allies continued to strike against the Zorvax fleet, the massive empire began to crumble under the weight of its own overconfidence. The Zorvax had believed their dominance in the galaxy was unchallenged, that they would crush humanity as they had crushed countless others. But in every strike, in every fight, humanity had shown them their greatest mistake: they had underestimated Earth. The Dauntless fought in the heart of the conflict, with Carter and Novak leading their forces with determination that was impossible to match. With each passing hour, the Zorvax forces began to retreat, their ships scattering like cockroaches in the wake of a storm. But the battle was not over yet. Their flagship, the Leviathan, loomed in the distance, a behemoth of dark metal and death. It had taken the combined efforts of every ship in the fleet just to whittle down the Zorvax numbers, but now, the final showdown was at hand. Earth's command, the final push. Back at Earth's command center, Vasquez stood in front of the holographic map, watching the battle unfold in real time. Every pulse of the battle was reflected on the massive screen before her. The Zorvax had been pushed back, but the Leviathan was still a formidable force. The fate of the galaxy now lay in humanity's hands. "General," Blackwell said, voice strained. "We've lost communication with several fleets. It's chaos out there." He looked at the screen, where Earth's forces were locked in a desperate struggle. "We need a breakthrough, or we'll lose everything." Vasquez's fingers drummed on the console, her mind racing. There was one chance, one move that could turn the tide completely. The Titan warships had been designed with one weapon in mind, one that could pierce even the thickest Zorvax armor, the quantum cannon. But it required the perfect shot, the right moment, and an almost suicidal approach. "Prepare the Titan fleet for a final assault," she ordered, her voice cold with resolve. "We're going to destroy the Leviathan and end this once and for all." The final assault. Carter's eyes narrowed as the Leviathan loomed larger on his display. He knew what was coming. His heart raced as the countdown to their assault began. "Novak," Carter said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming chaos, "this is it. If we hit this shot, we end it." Novak nodded, her expression resolute. "No second chances." Dauntless pushed forward, its engines burning bright, cutting through the mass of enemy ships that still surrounded the Zorvax flagship. The combined fleets of the Karis, Oroliths, and Saitari followed closely behind, but they knew this was humanity's moment. The Zorvax had taken so much from them, and now, they would face the consequences. The Zorvax flagship Leviathan unleashed a massive volley of fire, its weapons tearing through space with devastating force. The battle was at its peak, ships maneuvering in every direction, fire lighting up the darkness of space. And yet, amidst the chaos, Carter's focus remained unbroken. His hands gripped the controls, his eyes locked on the enemy ship as the Dauntless neared the Leviathan. Activate the quantum cannon. Full power to the forward shields, Carter commanded, voice taut with tension. The Titan ships in the fleet opened fire, launching massive energy blasts toward the Zorvax behemoth. It was a coordinated strike like no other, hundreds of ships, all focused on one singular goal. But the Leviathan wasn't done yet. Its weapons fired again, a final desperate retaliation. Carter's heart pounded in his chest as he counted down. 5 seconds. He could feel the energy building, the hum of the quantum cannon's charge coursing through the ship's systems. His mind raced, the fate of billions of lives hanging in the balance. 3 seconds. Novak gritted her teeth, watching the Zorvax flagship on her screen. Ready. 1 second, now. The Dauntless surged forward, the full might of humanity's greatest weapon released in a blinding burst of energy. The quantum cannon's pulse of raw power pierced through space, a beam of concentrated energy that cut straight through the Leviathan's shields and into its heart. Victory and the dawn of a new era. The Leviathan exploded in a cataclysmic burst of light, its massive form disintegrating into 1,000 pieces. The shockwave sent ripples through the remaining Zorvax fleet, and one by one, their ships began to fall. Without their flagship, the Zorvax forces had no central command, no coordination. The battle was won. Humanity had done the impossible. As the remnants of the Zorvax fleet retreated, Vasquez's voice echoed through every communication channel, the relief and triumph clear in her tone. This is General Vasquez. The Zorvax are defeated. Earth stands. We stand. The galaxy, once darkened by the shadow of the Zorvax Empire, now stood at a crossroads. Earth had risen, against all odds, from the depths of despair to become a beacon of hope. No longer would the galaxy see Earth as a primitive, insignificant world. Humanity had proven that they could conquer the stars, and that their resolve, their ingenuity, and their unity were forces to be reckoned with. The allies who had stood by Earth's side, who had come from the far reaches of space to aid the human race, now looked to Earth as an equal. But more than that, they looked to humanity as a force capable of shaping the future of the galaxy. And so, with the ashes of the Zorvax scattered across the void, humanity stood at the dawn of a new era. An era where they would no longer be the underdog. Where they would no longer be underestimated. In the vastness of space, humanity had defied the impossible, and in doing so, they had conquered the stars. The future was theirs.